प्रोग्राम सोशल रिव्यू के एक और एपिसोड के साथ मैं हूं आपकी मेज़बान समीन नवाज़। अपने आज के इस प्रोग्राम में हम कुछ बात करेंगे इमिग्रेशन के हवाले से और एक मरतबा फिर हम कुछ बात करना चाहेंगे ऐसे पाकिस्तानियों के हवाले से जो अमेरिका में मुकीम हैं अरसा दराज से, और वो अमेरिका से बाहर मुकीम अपने अहल खाना को, चाहे वो माँ बाप हों, चाहे वो बहन भाई हों या और दीगर उनके रिलेटिव्स हों, उनको अमेरिका बुलाना चाहें तो उसके लिए क्या तरीक़ाकार इख्तियार किया जा सकता है। क्या महज अमरीकी शहरियत रखने वाले या अमरीकी पासपोर्ट रखने वाले लोग अपने ख़ानदान के दीगर अफराद को, अपने अहल खाना को, अपने फैमिली मेम्बर्स को अमेरिका बुला सकते हैं, या जो ग्रीन कार्ड होल्डर्स हैं, जो जिनके पास अभी सिर्फ ग्रीन कार्ड मौजूद है, वो भी अपने फैमिली मेम्बर्स को अमेरिका बुलाने का कोई तरीक़ाकार रखते हैं। अपने आज के इस प्रोग्राम में गुफ्तगू करने के लिए एक बार फिर हमने मदऊ किया है अटॉर्नी हैं जॉनथन अफ्तालियन। उनसे गुफ्तगू करेंगे और उनसे कुछ सवालात हैं जिनके जवाब जानना चाहेंगे। उनसे गुफ्तगू का बाकायदा आगाज़ करेंगे, लेकिन एक ब्रेक के बाद।
आपके टैक्स का मसला छोटा है या हो बड़ा, केपीएन टैक्स एंड अकाउंटिंग सर्विसेज तकरीबन 15 साल से कम्युनिटी में अपना एक मुनफरिद मकाम रखता है। हमारा तजुर्बाकार अमला आपके जाती टैक्स और बिजनेस टैक्स बनाने में आपकी खिदमत में हाजिर है। इसके अलावा हमारे यहाँ बुक कीपिंग, पेरोल टैक्स, सेल्स टैक्स की सहूलत भी मौजूद है। अगर आप कोई कॉरपोरेशन, LLC, पार्टनरशिप या जाती कंपनी बनाना चाहते हैं तो हमारी खिदमत जरूर हासिल कीजिए। केपीएन टैक्स एंड अकाउंटिंग सर्विसेज।
वेलकम बैक नाज़रीन। प्रोग्राम सोशल रिव्यू में एक बार फिर आपको खुशामदीद कहेंगे। जिस तरह हमने बात की कि आज के इस प्रोग्राम में हम कुछ बात करेंगे अमेरिका में बसने वाले ऐसे पाकिस्तानियों की जिनके फैमिली मेम्बर्स इस वक्त उनके हमरा मौजूद नहीं हैं, और वो उनको अमेरिका बुलाने के लिए क्या तरीक़ाकार इख्तियार कर सकते हैं, और क्या महज अमरीकी पासपोर्ट रखने वाले अफराद अपने फैमिली मेम्बर्स को बुला सकते हैं, या ग्रीन कार्ड होल्डर्स भी अपने फैमिली मेम्बर्स को बुलाने का कोई तरीक़ाकार रखते हैं। गुफ्तगू का आगाज़ करेंगे और इसके लिए हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं आज के इस प्रोग्राम में एक बार फिर अटॉर्नी Jonathan Aftalian. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining us again in program. Jonathan, can you please tell us who we can sponsor?
Yeah, so U.S. citizens and green card holders can sponsor their family members from overseas. It depends if you're a U.S. citizen or a green card holder on who you could actually bring in. And there are different categories that you would fit within. So green card holders, they could bring in their spouses and their children under 21. Their children over 21, they're going to have to wait a while before they could get in. Same with U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens can bring in their parents, as long as or if you're a U.S. citizen, your parent is considered an immediate relative. So you could petition for them, you could petition for your spouse, and you could petition for your children. In addition, if you're a U.S. citizen, you could also petition for your siblings. So that's the difference between U.S. citizen and green card holders. You have to be a U.S. citizen to petition for your siblings.
Okay, Mr. Aftalian, can a green card holder sponsor someone?
Yeah, I think it's important for green card holders to know that if they're filing for their children who are over the age of 21, those individuals need to remain unmarried. So if you're a green card holder and you're filing for your child, and your child is over the age of 21 and they're unmarried, then they'll be able to come in once a visa becomes available for them. So you have to wait for a date for the visa to become available. If that person gets married, then they drop out altogether. So you have to remain unmarried, or you have to wait until the green card holder becomes a U.S. citizen, and then that child and then that son or daughter could get married.
Jonathan, what is the first step to sponsor our relatives?
The first step to sponsor your relatives is you file an I-130 petition, which is a petition for alien relative. Once that petition is filed and it's approved, so basically that petition, you're showing the US government that you have a real relationship with that person. It could be you're filing it for your spouse, so that you prove that it's a real marriage, or you're filing it for your children, so you prove that you are either the biological father or parent or a step parent, or that you're filing for your parents and that you are a child of your parent. Once the I-130 is approved, then you begin what's called consular processing. You go to the National Visa Center and you submit certain documents to the National Visa Center to be able to schedule your relative who's overseas for an interview, and then so they could get their green card at the interview and come into the United States.
Jonathan, which relatives take less time to get his or her immigrant visa?
So this is a good question. So if you're a US citizen, there are certain categories that are immediate relatives, which means that these individuals have immediate access to a visa. Those are a parent, a spouse, or a child under the age of 21. So if a US citizen is filing for any of those three categories, parent, spouse, or child under the age of 21, they do not need to wait for a visa number to become available. They could go straight to the interview process and go on the interview and then come into the United States. If you are, then there are different, it depends which category you're in. So if you're over the age of 21 and you're unmarried, you have to wait a certain amount of times. If you're over the age of 21 and you're married, you have to wait a certain amount of time. If you're a brother or sister of a US citizen, you have to wait another amount of time. And then green card holders, it depends. Right now, green card holders can bring in their spouses and their children under 21 immediately. But their children over 21 do need to wait.
Okay, here we can take a short break. एक हम ब्रेक लेंगे, ब्रेक के बाद वापस आएंगे तो इसी हवाले से कुछ मज़ीद बातचीत करेंगे। कुछ सवालात हैं जिनके जवाबात लेना चाहेंगे। एक ब्रेक के बाद हमारे साथ रहिए।
गाड़ी खराब हो गई है तो हरगिज परेशान ना हो, यहाँ वहाँ कहीं ना जाएं। साबू ऑटोमोटिव रिपेयर पर तशरीफ लाएं और अपनी गाड़ी की मुकम्मल इंस्पेक्शन करवाएं। इंजन में खराबी हो या हो सस्पेंशन का मसला, व्हील बैलेंसिंग करानी हो या फिर अलाइनमेंट, हर काम मयारी और मुकम्मल तसल्ली के साथ करवाएं। साबू ऑटोमोटिव रिपेयर वर्कशॉप में अपनी गाड़ी की न्यूयॉर्क स्टेट इंस्पेक्शन भी करवाएं। 1259 मैकडोनल्ड एवेन्यू, ब्रुकलिन, न्यूयॉर्क 718-377-2323।
वेलकम बैक नाज़रीन, प्रोग्राम सोशल रिव्यू में एक बार फिर आपको खुशामदीद कहेंगे। और जिस तरह से हमने बात की कि एक मरतबा फिर आज के इस प्रोग्राम में ज़ेर बहस है हमारा मौजू इमिग्रेशन के हवाले से उन लोगों की जो दियार गैर में अमरीका में, यानी कि वो तमाम तर पाकिस्तानी मुकीम हैं जो इस वक्त अमरीकी शहरियत हासिल कर चुके हैं लेकिन वो अपने फैमिली मेम्बर्स को अमरीका बुलाना चाहते हैं, तो उनके लिए क्या कुछ तरीक़ाकार है, इस पर हम गुफ्तगू कर रहे हैं। और हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं इस मौजू पर गुफ्तगू के लिए अटॉर्नी Jonathan Afthalian. Jonathan, some people don't have enough income to provide affidavit of support. Is there any alternative way to bring their family here?
This is a very good question. So the answer is yes, in terms of you would have to get a co-sponsor. So you do have to have a sponsor in the United States. And what the sponsor is a contract to the US government that if that person coming in takes public benefits before they become a citizen, then that sponsor would agree to pay back the government. It's a contract that the sponsor creates. And the sponsor needs to make a certain amount of money for the government to agree to that contract. Now, if the sponsor does not have that high of an income, what they do is they get a co-sponsor. So this would be another person who will show their taxes and agree that if the first sponsor cannot pay you back, I'm also a co-sponsor. I also agree to pay the government back if the person coming in does take public benefits. So you do need affidavit of support, and you do need a sponsor that reaches a certain threshold in terms of income, but you could get a co-sponsor and combine the income together to get to that point.
Jonathan, why it take 10 to 12 years to bring our siblings to USA? Is there any way to expedite the application?
This is a good question, and the answer is because the law says so. Our laws are created in a way where, as of right now, if you're filing for a sibling, if a U.S. citizen is filing for a sibling, it's taking about 13 and a half to 14 years for that visa number to become available for them. There is no way to expedite it. The laws are concrete. We hope that immigration reform can change these laws the way that they are right now. But the policy behind it, what the government is trying to not have happen, is that if you bring in a brother or sister, that brother and sister can bring in their spouse, they can bring in their children, and then the government mistakenly calls this chain migration. I don't necessarily agree with that, but this is where the term, if you heard of the term chain migration, this is where it comes from. So in order to limit the amount of people to enter the United States, they put such high wait times, 13, 14 years to bring in siblings, to discourage people to file for their siblings. Because if you're looking at it and you're saying, well, if I file for you, but it's going to be 13, 14 years down the line, maybe I don't even file for you. And that's what they've been doing. And we hope that there's new laws that come into place and allow siblings to come into the United States sooner.
Mr. Aftalian, can we sponsor someone who is already here on visit visa?
So to answer this question, look, it's people who come here on visitor visas create an agreement with the government to go back at a certain time. They come here on a temporary visa. So if you're coming here intending to stay past your visa, the U.S. government could, I'm not saying they're going to, but they could say that you abused your visa because they could find that you intended to stay. So to answer your question, yes, it depends what type of a person it is. So if you're the spouse of a U.S. citizen, technically you could overstay your visa and have that U.S. citizen file for you, and then you would have to, you don't need a waiver in that situation. You could stay here past your visa date and have your spouse file for you. However, I think the best way to do it is to go back home from your visitor visa. You go back home, you have that person file for you, and then you come in through the embassy overseas.
So the last question is, in some cultures, it's allowed to have 2 wives. Can they bring both here?
Okay. This is actually a very good and important question, because you're right. There's many cultures that believe in multiple wives, which is polygamy. Okay. Now, the issue is the U.S. laws are very clear in terms of you can only have one spouse at a time in terms of your petitioning. So the U.S. government normally recognizes all marriages as long as you're in your home country and you fulfilled the whatever ceremonies that you needed to get married in that country. The U.S. will recognize that marriage. In terms of immigration benefits to bring in a family member, you can only be married to one person, one valid person at a time. And that valid person is your first marriage. So if you're married to one wife and then you get married to a second wife, the US government would consider that second marriage invalid because you're still married to the first wife. If you're married to the first wife, get a divorce from the first wife, and then get married to the second wife, then you're allowed to file a petition for the second wife. So to answer your question, no, you cannot bring multiple wives into the United States. The US government would deem that second or even third or fourth marriage as invalid. They would only count the first marriage.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan Aftalian. हमारे साथ मौजूद थे अटॉर्नी हैं और हम कुछ बातचीत कर रहे थे अमेरिका में इमिग्रेशन के हवाले से और उन लोगों के हवाले से जो अमरीकी शहरियत के हामिल तो हैं, अमरीकी पासपोर्ट भी रखते हैं, लेकिन अभी उनके फैमिली मेम्बर्स अमरीका में मौजूद नहीं हैं और वो उनको बुलाने के लिए क्या तरीक़ा-ए-कार इख्तियार कर सकते हैं, कौन से वो प्रोसीजर्स हैं जिसको वो फॉलो कर सकते हैं और यहाँ पर अमरीका पर उन लोगों को बाकायदा तौर पर अपने साथ रख सकते हैं। आज के इस प्रोग्राम के लिए फ़िलहाल इतना ही। अगले हफ्ते एक और प्रोग्राम के साथ आपके सामने हाजिर होंगे। प्रोग्राम टीम के साथ समीन नवाज़ को इजाज़त दीजिए। अल्लाह निगहबान।